Okay, it's story time with Roy again. And we have The Debt, Chapter 2, Part 2. The office room was dark, lit only by candlelight. To the left, from the entry of the door, was an expensive desk made of polished mahogany wood. Behind it sat a well-dressed Chinese man in a red satin business shirt and red satin tie, with a black robe slightly covering his shirt. He had a beard and a goatee full of salt and pepper black hair mixed with gray. In front of the desk, and proceeding in a straight line, was a row of beautifully decorated chairs. A man dressed in black robes with a hood that covered his head, leaving his face obscured in the darkness, stood in the doorway. "Father, you wish to speak with me?" "Yes, my son. Please enter." The man behind the desk indicated to the chair directly in front of the desk. The black shape passed into the room like a shadow and sat in the chair and patiently waited as the man finished reading a piece of paper. When he had finished this, he sighed and said, "My son, I have called you this for many years now, and I have truly loved you as though you were my own. Many times I have wished that it was so. As have I, Father. I could never have asked for or sought for a better or greater man to call father, or a better man to call brother, than your own true-blood son." "You, then, have been content with us?" "Of course, my father. Has there ever been now or ever any cause that can be given that I have not been happy here with my true family?" The man behind the desk smiled. "No. There has never been any cause to doubt your love or your loyalty in any matter whatsoever. I have been as proud and honored by you and as blessed by you as by my own son, your dear brother. I just wished to speak with you of these things before I spoke with you of the real reason why I called you to me." The old man stopped speaking for a moment, while the hooded figure sat quietly, patiently waiting for him to continue. But when he did so, the old man's demeanor changed to a very businesslike one. "I have received a message from America, from your Uncle Chin in Seattle. Michael Borden wishes you to see him. He says that he has important information concerning you and your possible lineage." "My father, for you are my earthly father, and you are rightly called this. Who my paternal father is, that is as well known to you as it has always been known to me. I fear that speaking to Michael Borden of these matters means very little to me. What can he tell me that I do not know already?" "This may be so, my son, but he has also requested your aid. It seems that he fears that there are those who do not wish whatever information he has discovered to be known to you. If this is so, then there must be some reason behind why the information he has found is so important, and also why someone would wish you to not know it at all. I see the wisdom in your words and thoughts, Father. Perhaps I should investigate this matter further, even if for no other reason than to prove the falsity of the information. My son, remember to remain open-minded. From what we both know of Officer Borden in the past, I do not believe he would contact you in a matter such as this, unless he felt there were an important reason behind it." "I know, Father. I must go anyway, for he has asked for my assistance, and I have given my word to do so. I owe him a great debt, and I seek to pay this debt in full to show my gratitude for what he has done for me before." "I am very proud of you, my son. Go and do honor to yourself and your family name. I ask only that you not tell your brother where you are going and why. He would wish to go with you, and I cannot bear to risk losing both of my sons at once, though I doubt that much harm could come to him with you there. Still Father, I understand. I will leave in the morning before he raises his lazy bones out of bed." Both men gently laughed. "My son, you may take my personal plane. I will contact Uncle Chin and make arrangements for your arrival." "Thank you, my father," he said as he rose from the chair. The old man stood up, and both men bowed to each other. After this, they had both exited the room. The older man went to the right. and the hooded man went to the left. Michael was standing by his window, looking out covertly, using a pair of binoculars to survey the street. He saw nothing out of the ordinary. Laying on his bed was his cell phone, which had just began to ring. He picked it up. He looked at the caller ID and answered it. "Hello, Angel. How are you doing settling into your new place?" "It's going fine, Dad. Ramona and I have been unloading boxes all morning, and it looks like in a few more hours the unpacking will be done. I just wanted to call you and make sure you were okay and invite you over for dinner later. I'm going to call and ask Brian to come over so we can all spend the evening together as a family. After all, this will be my first real meal here at the new place, and I want you both here with me." "That would be outstanding, Angel, but I am not sure if I can make it tonight. Tomorrow night might be better for me. I'm waiting for a visit from an old friend. Would a rain check for tomorrow night be okay?" "Sure, I guess that would be all right, Dad," Angelina said with a slight sound of disappointment in her voice. "But why don't you just bring your friend over to dine with us tonight?" "Sorry, Angel, but I don't know when he will arrive. He's coming here from out of town, and I don't want to put you through the trouble of preparing a meal not knowing when or if I will be there to eat it. It would be a shame to not be able to tie on the old feed bag and enjoy one of your feasts." He gently laughed as he said this. "Dad, should I send Ramona back to help you entertain your guest? I can—" "No, Angel. I don't need Ramona to come home. I am quite capable of taking care of myself for a couple of days. I don't think the dust bunnies are going to gang up and attack me overnight, and I am completely positive that I can make a meal on my own if necessary to keep me from starving to death." Both of them laughed. Angelina replied, laughing, "I wouldn't be too sure of that, Dad. I've tasted your cooking before. You better keep the phone number for poison control close by. You may need it." Both laughed again. "Thanks for the vote of confidence, kid. I'll remember that the next time you need a loan. Dad," the laughing continued. "All right, sweetheart. Say hi to Ramona and your brother for me. Tell him I love him, and I hope to see him soon." Michael's voice had become serious. "I love you, Angel. No matter what, don't ever forget that." A happy Angelina replied, "I love you too, Dad." Angel then kissed the phone, and Michael kissed it back. "Goodbye, Angel." "Goodbye, Dad." Then both ended the call. Michael dropped the cell phone back onto the bed. Michael then said out loud, "I hope that our goodbye isn't a final one yet, Angel." Michael turned back to face the window, reaching for the binoculars again to take them from the top of the dresser where he placed them to answer the phone. That is when a bullet went through the glass and hit him. The bullet was not a perfectly clean shot, as it hit part of the wood frame in the glass window, deflecting the bullet off target, just slightly enough to make what should have been initially a fatal shot into a fatal but not an instant kill wound. There is no sound of an audible report. Michael dropped to his knees with blood beginning to flow from his mouth. Struggling to speak, he said, "So this is how it ends, huh? Oh, Kimberly, I love you so much. I was eager to see you again, just not this soon. You always said that those who live by the sword shall die by it. I guess I never paid as much attention to your words when you spoke of God and Jesus, or your faith in both of them, when you were alive. You said you always wished that I would accept Christ into my life, so we could be together again in heaven." Michael coughed as more blood came from his mouth, and his speech became more labored, along with his breathing. I don't know if I'm doing this right, but God, Father, please forgive my sins. Jesus, please come into my heart. Guide my family. Take care of them. Take me, please. Take me to my Kim, please. I ask you, in Jesus' holy name. Amen. Michael then reached on the bed and grabbed the double-barreled shotgun and fired it at the window as he dropped to the floor. 5 seconds later, he is dead. A neighbor who heard the shotgun blast calls 911. Seattle Police Detective Brian Borden had arrived on site at 10:56 a.m. that morning at the scene of a mysterious shooting of what was supposed to be an unknown man in South Seattle. A police officer on scene began to inform Brian what was known thus far in the investigation. The man had been found with no identification on him, and it appeared that no one had disturbed the body after the shooting, so it was doubtful that anyone had lifted his wallet, making robbery an unlikely motive for the killing. Brian had asked the officer if anyone had witnessed the incident, but was told that no one had come forward yet, and it was unknown if anyone had witnessed anything at all. As Brian approached the car, he could see the bullet went right through the windshield. The hole was large. Obviously, a high-caliber pistol or possible rifle shot had been fired at the driver. Brian wondered if it was done at close range, or if it had been done sniper style from a distance. Brian then looked across the street and saw an area where no streetlight would have lit up the area in the dark of night. Brian pointed this out to the officer, who was aiding him, and was told that the area had been checked earlier, but no shell casing had been found there or anywhere around. The officer also said that there were a lot of prints all over the area of the crime scene, but the whole place was a heavy foot traffic area most of the day, as the detective should know well himself. Brian did. He was well acquainted with the area. Brian then turned back and started to walk towards the vehicle, where he began to see clearly the face of the man behind the wheel. Dear God, it's Uncle Keith, Brian thought to himself. How will I tell Dad? The death of my mom near destroyed him, though he did his best to hide it. How will he react to the death of his best friend, his brother? Brian's thoughts raced. The Bordens were a long-running police family with generations serving the police department. Brian's own paternal grandparents were from the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia. They were both killed by a car bomb planted by a mafia family that wanted Brian's grandfather to pay for a series of arrests and convictions of several members of the crime family. Brian's dad was consumed with ideas of revenge until Brian's mom convinced Michael to move to Seattle, to start over before the same fate came to them that had happened to Brian's grandparents. Still, Michael got involved with the organized crime unit in Seattle. To Brian's father's own surprise, he had found that there were certain members of the crime families that he felt sorry for, and some he even actually liked. One family in particular, Michael had liked because they were actually old-school mafia. They actually had an honor code and lived and died by it. They were playing by self-imposed rules that no longer seemed to exist in most of the other families. Michael had once said this about them, that he did not believe that what they did was right, but they also seemed to cause much less trouble on the streets overall compared to the others. Michael had seemed to kind of respect them for that. Brian had never understood sentiments like that. He always thought that a criminal was a criminal and that all of them belonged in cages or dead. It wasn't until he became an officer himself and saw what things were really like that he began to understand his father's way of thinking, and why he thought that way, though he didn't agree with it. Keith, to Michael, was sort of an anchor to him, just like Brian's mom was. They had both helped to hold Michael in check and to keep him from becoming nothing more than a vengeful man. It was most likely the influence of both Keith and Kim which had made it even possible for Michael to have any feelings of mercy at all towards mobsters of any kind, and probably even for that certain crime family in particular. Keith and Michael had had such an amazing relationship. Brian's Uncle Keith was an orphan who had never known his parents and had no known family. The Bordens were his family. Michael had never had many friends, as he kept to himself mostly. Just a small few here and there, and a lot of acquaintances. But Keith and Michael were as close could be. It never mattered how long they had not seen each other. As soon as they were together again, they would talk and carry on conversations as if they'd only just been talking to each other the day before, like there had never been any break between them at all. Brian knew his Uncle Keith had worked for some secret, deep-cover government organization that dealt a lot with national security and things. He began to wonder if this had been a factor involved in his murder. Was that what he was in town for? Did Dad know he was here? Did his job get him killed? Should I identify him or wait and let his organization identify him? All these things and thoughts and questions brought him right back to the hardest question of all. How do I tell Dad? Brian lit a cigarette and watched the smoke rise. He finished the first, then lit another. Then he looked back at the car and sighed. I guess there isn't anything else but for it, he thought to himself as he took out his phone and called his father, hoping that he might have some answers to some of his questions. The phone rang, and he got no answer. When he went to voicemail, he hung up. He didn't know what to say. Then he called again. Still no answer. He left a message. Dad, call me back ASAP. It's Brian. He ended the call, and as he walked back over to Keith's car, just then his phone rang. He expected it to be his father, but instead the voice of a friend of his in the Renton Police Department came through the speaker. Brian? Hey, buddy. I have some bad news for you about your father. I'm at his home right now, and you better come here yourself right away. What's going on? I'll tell you when you get here. Tell me now, Brian insisted. I'm at a crime scene. You need to come here, and then we'll talk. It's urgent, came the response. All right, I'm on my way, Brian said. Brian ended the call and turned to the officer still on scene with Keith's body and said, I will be back later. Keep me updated. I have another matter to attend to. The officers all confirmed the request as Brian walked over to the car, and as fast as he could, he raced towards his father's house with his light and siren blaring. Brian arrived on scene and found police cars, a fire truck, and an ambulance on site. He was about to enter the house when his Renton police friend met him at the door. Brian, I'm very, very sorry to have to be the one to tell you this, but Brian cut him off as he brushed past him, calling, Dad! Dad! Brian looked around at each room as he went straight for the bedroom and saw the ghastly sight of his father lying on the floor. In his left hand he clutched Brian's mother's cross, and in his right hand, locked in a death grip, was the sawed-off double-barreled shotgun. Blood was still wet around his mouth, and a pool of blood lay underneath his body. Tough Detective Brian Borden, who was known for having an iron stomach and nerves of steel, broke down sobbing like a child. At least I won't have to tell Dad about Keith. Mom, Dad, and Keith are all together now, Brian thought to himself. Brian's friend helped him outside, where they both lit cigarettes and watched the emergency personnel go in and out of the house. Brian hadn't regained his composure enough yet to do much of anything else. He knew he needed to call his sister and let her and Ramona know what had happened, but he really wasn't ready to make that call yet. Not yet, anyway. Brian crushed out his cigarette and then took out and lit another one, asking his friend if he could have some privacy. I've got to call my sister, and Brian didn't finish. It's all right, buddy. I understand. Give my condolences to Angelina for me. I'm so sorry for you and your family. It's just so... He then turned and walked away, shaking his head as he went. Almost all the police officers in the cities around Seattle had known of and respected Detective Lieutenant Michael Borden. His death would send a ripple of grief through many people in the law enforcement community, whether they knew him or not. The feeling of love and respect and grief that was beginning to even then to flow like a rising tidal wave still gave Brian no help as he faced making the phone call that he so dreaded to have to make. If he had thought telling his father about Keith was going to be hard, he found the prospect of telling his adopted sister of their dad's death was almost an impossible task for him to accomplish. Brian lifted his phone and then called her. Angelina and Ramona were laughing and talking as they were unpacking boxes and putting each of the items in their respective places. It was in the midst of their mirth that Angelina's cell phone rang. "Hi, Brian. I was going to call you later and invite you to my new place tomorrow night," she said, still laughing. "Angelina," Brian said, trying to interrupt her. "I spoke to Dad earlier, and he should be coming." "Angelina," Brian said a little more sternly, "I'm planning on cooking a turkey dinner with all the—" "Angel!" Brian near yelled in a fierce voice. Brian had not wanted to be angry or mean with her, but his frustration was getting to him. Angelina instantly stopped laughing, as all of her mirth was quickly drained from her. Brian never called her Angel. Only Dad did that. The only other time Brian had called her Angel, he had been very, very angry with her. It was during one of their childhood fights that they had had, and it had been a pretty vicious one at that. Since there was no reason at this time for either of them to be angry with each other, she instantly knew that something must be very, very, very wrong. "Shut up and listen to me," Brian had said, very loud and forcefully. Ramona, who was standing close by, watched the change come over Angelina's demeanor. "Angelina, what's wrong?" she asked. Angelina waved her hand at Ramona, giving her a signal to keep quiet. "Angel," Brian said in a softer tone, "you need to brace yourself. I have some very bad news to tell you, and I wish I could go there and tell you in person, but I can't leave right now. I am at Dad's place. Dad has been shot. He's dead." Angelina broke down instantly into tears, even as the shock from what she had just heard began to sink in. "No, no, 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 no!" Angelina began screaming at the top of her voice as she sank to her knees, sobbing. Ramona ran over to Angelina, knelt down, and hugged her. "What's wrong? What's wrong?" Ramona asked anxiously. Daddy's dead." Angelina forced the words out as she began to shake as she cried. Ramona began crying also. Brian began to feel a lump in his throat as the tears streamed down his cheeks again. Then, clearing his throat, he called out, "Angelina! Angelina!" Ramona took the phone from Angelina's hand. "Yes, Brian, we're here." Ramona was crying as she spoke, while in the background Brian could hear Angelina crying unconsolably. "Ramona, tell Angelina I will be there as soon as I can, and I will fill you both in on what I know so far." "All right, Brian. I will tell her." "Talk to you both later," Brian said, and ended the call before he broke down again, completely himself. End of Chapter 2.